students have not necessarily, they,
Admitted Monroe Scholars. Looks like we have some joining us. We'll just get started in just a minute. We'll allow everybody that registered to join us, but thank you all for tuning in today. Okay. Go ahead and get started. My name is Caroline Ward. I am an assistant dean in the Office of Undergraduate Admission at William & Mary, and I'm very happy to be tuning in today and being a part of this panel. We have Dan Cristol with us, and I'll pass it on to you.
welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dan Cristol. I've been a biology professor at William & Mary for 25 years, and currently I'm also the director of undergraduate research at William & Mary, and in that position I oversee the Monroe Scholars through a institution called the Charles Center, which administers the Monroe Scholars. So I know all about Monroe Scholars, and I've worked with many of them in my own research and through this supervisory position. So I'm very happy to answer all your questions as they come up, and especially at the end. But first I want to tell you, because you have a big decision coming up, I want to tell you about William & Mary, about being a Monroe Scholar at William & Mary, and about undergraduate research at William & Mary. I did not go to William & Mary. I went to a big research university, and through that experience, I realized that big research universities are actually not good places to do research or really to be an undergraduate, in my opinion. They're not good places for undergraduates to get a chance to work with professors, because at big research universities, like I went to, there are lots and lots of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows and technicians, and that's who all the busy researchers want to work with. And so undergraduates come last and often don't get opportunities to meaningfully work with the people in charge of the research. If they get any opportunity at all, it's to work with students who are working with graduate students who are working with professors. Your other alternative, besides a big research university that some of you are probably considering, is a small liberal arts college. That's also a great place to go to college. I didn't do that. I kind of wish I had. I didn't know about William & Mary then, but I was interested in some small liberal arts colleges. And my process for deciding between colleges was really kind of uninformed. I went to every campus and I looked around and never talked to anybody. Definitely didn't talk to any professors. Didn't really ask the important questions. What I actually did was to go to the soccer field, because I wanted to play soccer at college, and I looked around at the condition of the soccer field, and I saw how many movie theaters there were in the town, and looked and took a sniff in the dining hall to see if the food smelled good, and that was about it. And these were really, really uninformed way to pick colleges. What I didn't know about small liberal arts colleges, was that you get a lot of attention from your professors there, which would have been a really good thing for me. So I should have gone there, except for one thing. Those professors are so busy paying attention to their students and teaching them that they don't actually do a lot of research. So since I grew up to become a researcher, that wouldn't have been a good option for me either. William & Mary would have been perfect. William & Mary is bigger than those little schools, and so there's a lot of research going on here. And the professors here are equally split between teaching and research, and they're doing research that is really intended to change the world. It's not just an educational exercise. So We're not big enough, however, that we have lots of graduate students to take those research positions. So you will take those research positions. You will do research with professors if you come here as a Monroe Scholar. William Mary just happens to be perfectly in the middle between a large research intensive university and a small liberal arts college. So you get plenty of attention from your professors, but your professors are also doing really impactful research in all disciplines. So that's kind of my overall message about William and Mary. We happen to be the best place in the country for an undergraduate to come and be a scholar and do research outside of the classroom. Inside the classroom, it really doesn't matter where you go. College classes are great, and college is great, and you'll have a good time wherever you go. The majors are pretty much the same everywhere. The content of the classes is pretty much the same everywhere. The professors are mostly really good everywhere, with probably a few bad teachers here and there at every school. So that's not really the way to decide upon colleges. Nor should you go to the soccer field, nor should you take a sniff of the dining hall food, because you can fix all that stuff, and you may not end up playing soccer anyway. I can tell you from personal experience. But what you can't change about a college is the attitudes of the professors towards the undergraduates. And at a big research school, bad attitude. Small research school, great attitude, but such a great attitude that they don't actually do research and offer you those kinds of opportunities very often. So you should come to William Mary, and you should be a Monroe Scholar because it comes with guaranteed research money. So your first project as a freshman, your pilot project, is paid for, and your second project, your first summer usually, or your second summer, your second or your third summer, that's also paid for. So you don't even have to struggle to figure out how to fund the research. You don't have to be limiting yourself to professors that have research money for you, etc. But I'll get into the details of the program later. Let me reiterate my first message to you. William Mary is the perfect place to come and do undergraduate research. You, as a Monroe Scholar, are well positioned to take advantage of that. It's easier to do here than anywhere else. We do more of it. It happens to be Undergraduate Research Month right now, and you can Google Undergraduate Research Month at William Mary and see all of the results of research that students have been doing in the last year. It's incredible. Literally hundreds and hundreds of students have their abstracts up there. We have 30 events over the course of the month, and I'm sure Caroline can share a link with you in the chat. But every year we have that much research going on. Every year we have lots of students publishing lots of papers with their professors, which is really impressive. They're not publishing them in student journals. They're not publishing them in the school journal. They're publishing real papers in real journals. The people reading them don't even know that they're undergraduates, and they're doing it with their professors, and they're making a real impact on the world. I'll tell you a story about what my students did in a moment. But Undergraduate Research Month is something that we started here to sort of showcase all of that work that's happening. And much of that work is being done by Monroe Scholars, because the Monroe Scholars bring in their own funding, so professors really want to work with them because they don't have to take money out of their grant to pay you for the summer. So the Charles Center administers undergraduate research at William Mary, and I'm the director of undergraduate research through the Charles Center. And we give about $1 million to about 300 to 400 students a year, and almost all of that goes towards paying your summer stipend. So the concept is that you get this money, you do research in whatever form you're interested in, and you pay yourself a stipend, $3,000 for the summer. In your first summer, you can do it with $1,000, and you're expected to just work 3 weeks, because we don't think you're quite ready probably to spend a whole summer doing your own research project in your first summer. You might be, but we want you to practice. But in your second or third summer, you write a proposal, it gets vetted by a committee, and unless it's absolutely terrible and we make you rewrite it, you get funded with your $3,000. You have to have a faculty on board who will be mentoring you, and you pay yourself that stipend. And the idea is that while it's not a lot of money, it only comes to about $10 an hour, you don't have to go out and get a summer job. You might even be able to do something that can be done in 7 weeks. So you might be able to do something for the other portion of the summer. So Charles Center administers all that money, And a lot of that's going to Monroe Scholars. And then, of course, other students have a more competitive process. They can do the same process, they can apply in the same way, but they're not guaranteed to get funded. We fund about 60 to 70% of the other students, 100% of the Monroe Scholars. So it's a wonderful perk. So let me talk a little bit more about the Monroe program. I've told you why you should come to William & Mary. I've told you why research at William & Mary with undergraduates is such a special feature. And I've told you who administers it, which is the Charles Center for Academic Excellence. What is the program that we administer? It's very simple. The heart of it is this research money. $1,000 if you choose to apply for a pilot project your first summer. $3,000 if you choose to apply your second or third summer to work the whole summer. Freshman year, you get to live in Monroe Housing if you choose. Most people do. Monroe Housing consists of 2 dormitories that are filled with Monroe Scholars and other scholars. And it's just a nice, increases the chance that your roommate and the people in your hall that you hang out with are going to be serious high-performing students like yourself. The fact is that everyone at William & Mary is a serious high-performing student, but some are a little bit more serious and more high-performing, and we think that you're in that group, and you might want to live with people like that if you are given a choice. So freshman year, you can live in Monroe Housing. We also have events, regular events, where you in small groups can sign up to meet a professor who's doing some interesting research. The idea is that you might want to do research with that professor, or at least get a taste for what's out there. So every few weeks you can sign up to do that. Those are usually small groups, like 10 people or so. And before the pandemic, we served you food. Now we don't. Now you meet with them virtually. We also have, in a normal year, we have some socials. We'll park an ice cream truck in front of Monroe Hall and have everyone hang out, meet each other. So we don't put a lot of demands on you. It's more like opportunities. And if you don't want to live in Monroe Hall and you don't want to get free ice cream and you don't want to meet with professors and you don't want to do research for the summer, we don't make you. But we hope that you do, and most people do. So that's the program in a nutshell, the Monroe Scholars Program. It is administered by a woman named Lindsay Love, and she also is in charge of fellowships and undergraduate research administration. Now, what fellowships are awards that you apply for junior or senior year, such as the Fulbright, the Rhodes Scholarship, the Marshall Scholarship, the Truman Scholarship, and there's about 15 or 20 more. The university is allowed to nominate people, set numbers of people, sometimes 1, sometimes 10, for each of these awards. So we have an internal competition, and we have internal training for interviewing skills and for having people look at your application packet before it goes out. And so as a Monroe Scholar, you'll have very close access to all of that information about how you can make yourself competitive for these sorts of postgraduate or senior year fellowships. These are sometimes a master's degree, sometimes they're just straight money, and some of them are money while you're in school still, like the Goldwater Scholars. They're all specialized. They're looking for this kind of person, they're looking for that kind of person. And Lindsay and her team have a lot of expertise on that. So you'll be sort of at ground zero for all of that. We have a group called the Peer Scholarship Advisors, and their job is to advise you, to prepare you for all 4 years to know about and apply for any of these opportunities. And they can help you decide which ones are appropriate, and they can provide you with resources on how you develop a competitive packet for one of these. Now back to the big picture of undergraduate research. Why would you want to do undergraduate research? Why should you come here as a Monroe Scholar with your guaranteed research money? The answer is got several parts, but it goes back to what I said about almost every college looking the same. And almost every college student comes out looking the same, right? They've been involved in a number of clubs. Some of them they are have started the club or they're officer in the club. They have a certain GPA. They've taken their LSAT or their MCAT. They've volunteered for the right number of hours at the right number of places, clinics if they're going to medical school, um, legal work, legal clinics if they, or summer internships at law firms if they're going to law school, etc. So, what actually can distinguish you from all of these people is undergraduate research, because most people don't have the opportunity to do sophisticated undergraduate research, to lead their own project, and to even publish real articles, go to real conferences and present their work nationally or internationally. You can do that at William & Mary, and as a Monroe Scholar, you're well positioned to do it because you're funded already to do it. So, not only will you develop personally from becoming extremely excited about generating knowledge on a particular topic, becoming literally one of the world's experts on that topic, and possibly making contributions to the public on that topic. Not only will you grow personally, but professionally, you'll be in a great position to be competitive for jobs that are looking for people who can independently solve problems, which is most jobs. You'll be competitive for postgraduate fellowships like the Rhodes and that sort of thing if you've done research. And you will be in a network of people that can help you move forward. The professors that you worked with will write amazing letters about you, saying they know you very, very well after doing research with you. The people that you collaborated with will become professional colleagues in the future. And when you're at an interview, even if you don't want to go do research, say as a physician or as a lawyer, when you're in an interview as a finalist for one of these things, for graduate school, professional school, being able to talk in depth about your research is something they're always going to want from you. And many people haven't done research, so they have to talk about other things. But you can show your passion for something. You can show your expertise for something. You can show that you're a finisher that can finish an honors thesis if you do research as an undergraduate. So I encourage people to do research in areas other than what they're interested in. You want to be a doctor? Do research in history. You want to be a history professor? Do research in health sciences. Look at the history of some disease, history of pandemic, something like that. So you can only benefit from doing undergraduate research. The one thing is you've got to come here and do well at school first. So we don't want you to come in and do it your first semester freshman year. We need you to prove that you can do well in college classes, that you can manage your time and that sort of thing. Then is the process of picking who you do research with. That often comes from classes. As you start to focus in on a potential major, you realize you like this certain professor or the kind of work that they're talking about, or you hear about somebody, wasn't your professor, but you hear about somebody whose students were doing cool work. How do you approach them? They're not going to come to you. You're not going to see a sign on the wall because everyone is besieged by people wanting to do research with them. So you have to go and send them an email and say, can I come and talk to you about doing undergraduate research in your lab, in your group? And then they will respond. You might have to email them twice if it's a busy time of the semester, but they will respond, and the response can be, no, I have too many students, please try next semester. The response can be, yes, what would you like to do? Or more likely it's something in the middle. And this is where it gets interesting. The response will be, yes, come talk to me. You come and talk to them and they say, my lab's pretty full, my group's pretty big, but you seem like you're interested. Why don't you read this? And they'll send you home with something to read. And then the ball's back in your court. Now you have to show that you can read that and you can be interested and you have some follow through, and you'll come back to them and you'll say, I read this, I'd like to discuss it with you. And so you go do that. More often than not, they'll take you into their lab at that point. You'll start working with other students to learn what skills they have. And maybe by that summer, you'll be working independently on a project that you and the professor have sort of come up with. That can be your Monroe project, or it could be the beginning of years of research that you do at William & Mary. Maybe one summer of which is your Monroe project. Now, other students don't follow that path. They just do the Monroe project. They don't really want to do several summers of research, several years of research. And that's fine too. Monroe project may be the one serious research endeavor you engage in. And for that, you go to a professor. You say, look, I don't really want to work in your lab for a whole year or anything, but I want to do this summer project. Here's my idea. And the professor it's going to come out one of three ways. They're going to say, sorry, I really can't help you with that because I don't know what you're talking about. Or they might say, yes, that's not right in line with what I do, but I'd love to learn more about that. I'd be happy to be your advisor. That's the way it usually goes. And then they'll write a letter of recommendation for you for your proposal. And then you'll confer with them before, during, and after the process. And the final step will be you presenting at Undergraduate Research Month next year, the year after. And your professor will be there with you, and lots of people come and talk to you about your work. And maybe that's the only research you ever do. Still, what a great experience. And opportunity to talk about that at interviews and to leverage that for other positions is great. So I'm going to just pause for a second, and because I see one question in the chat, and it seems like
so it looks like we have a question in the chat, and then if people tuning in could drop their questions in the Q&A box, that would be fantastic. But it does look like we have a question about how many students tend to apply for these fellowships like Goldwater Scholars from William & Mary.
So I can answer that question very specifically for Goldwaters, but also for the like others too. So for Goldwaters, William & Mary can put forward 4 people. Goldwater will look at 4 people, and they will award 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these grants. Goldwater's for juniors, we just got the results back, so we put forward 4, and 3 of them were awarded Goldwaters this year. It's very variable. I can't go above 4, but it could be 1, it could be 2. This year we had 3. That's only for STEM fields, by the way. There's other awards for other kinds of fields. So how many people applied to us for us to pick 4 from? We have a committee of 30 to 40 faculty who reviews these, and each year we have about 15 people applying to be among those 4 that we put forward. And we look for the most competitive, the people we think are going to win. If they all happen to be in computer science, then we put forward 4 computer scientists. If they all happen to be female students, then we put forward 4 female students. We are just looking for winners. So we pick the best 4, and one year in recent years we did win 4, but generally we win 2 or 3. So that's 15 for 4. Now, how many people apply for Rhodes Scholarship? We have a sort of tiered structure there for the very high prestige ones, where we have early interest forms. We get about 30 people. You have to start at the end of your junior year. You work on the application all summer. And then we interview some smaller number of those, and we select usually about a half a dozen to put forward. And of those, Rhodes will pick either 0 or 1, or this year 2 to do final interviews. So this year we had 2 people out of 16 in the region, and neither of them was picked. But you see, we got from 35 to 2 finalists that way. Others, like Fulbrights, many more are awarded, so many more apply. We had 27 Fulbright semifinalists. As a semifinalist, that means you're sent to the country that you want to do your Fulbright in, and they pick. We haven't got the final word on who got picked out of the 27, but to get to 27, we probably had only about 35 applicants. We don't screen Fulbright because we can put forward as many as we want. As many as we want is everyone who we think has a decent chance. So we put forward almost all of the 35. And most of them got to be semifinalists, which is incredible. I don't know how many will be actual finalists. So the answer varies a lot, and you have a pretty good chance because there's a strong incentive not to do this if you're not competitive, because it's a lot of work to apply for these things, many parts to these applications. Rhodes Scholars, by the way, have to get 8 letters of recommendation, 5 to 8 letters of recommendation. Just that is a lot of work. Getting to know 5 to 8 different professors well enough that they'll write you a letter of recommendation. That's a 4-year project. So anyway, thanks for that question, Nevada. And I'd be happy to entertain any other questions, but I'll also just keep talking. I just wanted to give myself a second to breathe.
Looks like we have a couple other questions come in,
Okay.
actually. Looks like we have a question. Do Monroe Scholars do their own research, or do they more frequently add on to their professors' research?
That is a great question. That is the eternal question. Do Monroe Scholars come up with their own projects, or do they develop projects out of their advisors' research? It can work either way. And part of that depends on whether there's someone here doing something that's really up your alley. If there is, you may have a better experience working in their group, surrounded by people who can exchange intellectual ideas with you and get you excited about the work. If there's nobody here doing the thing that you're interested in, then you need to find someone who can at least advise you on how to do that sort of research. It may not be their area. So the answer is it can work either way. But when you do research that is what you call an add-on to a professor's research, that's exactly what it is. You're adding on. You're not doing their research. You're doing your own research. You're coming up with your own ideas, but within the framework of what that professor's group is already set up to do. So all the equipment is there, all the skills and training is there, and so you can often move a lot faster if you do your research that way in an area that is already actively being pursued by this professor. But you can do it either way. If you look at the Monroe Scholars at the Undergraduate Research Month site, you'll see Monroe Scholars are mixed in with everybody else there. You will see that some of them are clearly working in clusters of areas around what a professor does, and others are completely in areas that no one is working on at this university, but they found someone to advise them on the work here. And remember, when we say research, we don't just mean traditional like lab coats, STEM type research. We also mean all of the research in the humanities, all the research in the social sciences, and in the arts. So writing your own play and getting it performed, that is research, right? You have added new knowledge to the world through that play or that dance or that theater performance. This is much broader than just STEM.
Awesome. Now we have another question. What kind of facilities are open for use in undergraduate research?
Well, William & Mary is all about undergraduates, so everything we've got is open for you, literally everything. And that doesn't just mean on campus. We even have, we have a campus in DC. We have the Highland campus near Charlottesville, which is James Monroe's old plantation. We have 300 acres of college woods, old growth forest on campus. There's VIMS, there's the law school, there's VIMS is the marine science school. All of this stuff is open to undergraduates. You may need help sort of penetrating these things, but within the departments, there's massive research infrastructure. So biology is what I'm most familiar with. We have a core lab, which means anybody can use the equipment as long as they're being supervised by a professor. We have many maker spaces on campus where there's things like very sophisticated 3D printers. We have, of course, a fantastic library system, which is a lot of research involves resources that you obtain through the library. But a lot of research also is done off campus. So you go to another country, you go to another area, go to museums, do your own research. So the campus is just the beginning, but believe me, everything at William & Mary is open to undergraduates. If you even ask that question, then you're looking at the wrong kinds of schools if you're looking at big universities, because at big universities, that's not true. There are whole sectors that are only known to graduate students. We hardly have any graduate students. So we have 6,000 undergrads, something like that. Caroline can correct me, but we have only less than 2,000 graduate students. And they're in the small business school, law school, education school, marine science school, and just a few departments: physics, computer science, history, anthropology has a small PhD program, and then there's a couple tiny master's programs here and there. So most departments have no graduate students. Everything there is available to you. And the most important thing is that the professors are available to you, and they are the biggest resource. If we don't have something, we'll figure out how to get what you need. I do research on pollution and how it affects birds, and I collaborate with people all over the country, and so do my students, because we don't have everything we need. We do things for them, they do things for us. We don't both need the same equipment. Much of my work's done in the field, but then I come back here and work in the lab on it. I personally have had 150 to 200 students working with me. They've published over 50 articles where they're authors on the article, including the journal Science, which is one of the two best journals in the world. So I'm not boasting, I'm just telling you that students here do serious research, and it ends up with real results. For example, our research team on the Shenandoah River in Western Virginia looked at mercury pollution in birds there, and the company DuPont had put the mercury in the river back in 1929, and we looked at the effects of it on the birds. And my students and I, our results were used as the primary component of a $50 million settlement to restore that river. So their research, it didn't just end up lost forever. It didn't end up just in some arcane journal somewhere. It ended up in a courtroom costing the polluters $50 million. And that was literally based on undergraduate students and a few master students going out, catching birds, taking a drop of blood, measuring it, working on it back in the laboratory for year after year. And after about 7 years of that, the case was settled. So research can have real impact, and the resources available to you are whatever is needed. But that's a great question.
And then we have a question asking that because William Mary encourages students to do summer research off campus to ensure they're part of that real world experience, well, is that the case? And then do students have an off-campus mentor if they're working with an outside organization? And then the student who mentions these questions is interested in pursuing pre-med and then volunteering as an EMT over the summer. So they want to combine the research with their volunteer work.
Okay, there's a lot going on there in that question. First of all, to answer the easy part, you could do a Monroe project while being an EMT over the summer. It's 7 weeks of full-time work, but you can spread that across all 13 or 14 weeks of the summer, which means there's time to be an EMT too. You can do it at home, and you can even do your research on, say, policies that affect EMT service, or interviews with EMTs on a particular topic, or although you have to get permission to do that to interview people because you're now doing research, so it's federally regulated. You could combine those two things beautifully. Now, what I might tell you if you came and talked to me when you get here next year is, you're doing all this pre-med stuff, you're being an EMT, maybe you should do research on something that isn't about being an EMT, either at home or one summer, don't be an EMT and stay here and work with the professor in the history department. So you have something really interesting to talk to in your med school interview to talk about. So we can have that conversation later. But so the first part of the question, though, I got too involved in the second part there. The first part was being on campus or being off campus. Both opportunities, if there's not a pandemic, let's hope this is all over soon, you can live on campus or near campus and do research with a professor physically with them in the library or in their lab, or producing your play here on campus or whatever it is. Or you can do research at home virtually with a professor. That's going to be easier now that we've had a pandemic because everybody's used to that. So you can access every single library material in the world now virtually. And so you can do a lot of research at home. And you can even look at the museum specimens online now and measure them and do whatever you need to. But your mentor would be your professor who would be here on campus. Or if you're working with an organization like a nonprofit that tries to end human trafficking, say, if you're doing work that is actually research and not just service to that group, your supervisor can be in that organization. But you do have to have a professor who's connected in some way, who's responsible to the university for you actually doing something. Otherwise, it's an internship, And those are perfectly fine too, but they're not really under research. And so they wouldn't make a suitable Monroe project. An internship is something which is a non-academic work experience, and you don't need a university supervisor for that. And we do pay for some of those too. So on campus or off campus is fine. Your mentor always has to be a professor, but that professor may be one step away from your actual supervisor. Hope that answers the question.
Yes, and then we have a question asking if the academic year research can work with the summer Monroe project to create a longer term activity.
Yes. So we can't pay you a stipend while you're a full-time student, so your Monroe money always comes for summer work. However, the ideal scenario is the following. You do a pilot project your first summer, you get involved with a professor through that, you start doing research in their lab during the academic year for which you get credits, usually one to 3 credits a semester, and usually there's a cap on that. You do it during the semester, and then you can work full-time on that project in the summer using your Monroe salary the next summer if you want. And then you can do it the next summer for an honors thesis if you want. And you can raise money through our Honors Fellows program, which is a different story. And it's open to everybody, not just Monroe Scholars. But Monroe Scholars are often in the mix there. So the ideal project is what you just described. Semester, working at a relatively low level for credit, and then intensively working in the summer while getting paid your Monroe stipend, and then possibly continuing it on after that. Some people do that 2 cycles, one in one professor's group and another in another professor's group. And some people decide they want to go away, study abroad one summer, they want to get an internship one summer, and one summer they want to do their Monroe project. Okay.
A busy couple of years right there.
Yeah.
And
I'm really into undergraduate research, as you can tell. So I think that's all you should do, but you may have some other ideas.
Right. And then someone's asked, can the Monroe funding be used for an REU program off-site?
Okay, so REU stands for Research Experience for Undergraduates, and it's funded by the National Science Foundation. Now, typically, the National Science Foundation gives a university money to bring students in from other universities to work with a group of specialists at that university. So people get together from around the country. The National Science Foundation loves this because you're meeting your future colleagues for saving the world through research. And these are STEM experiences. So can you use your Monroe Scholars money for that? You don't have to because REUs are well funded. So you make more money as an REU student accepting their stipend, and they also pay for all your travel. We would not like you to top yourself up with $3,000 extra on top of what they're giving you. However, it is possible that if you were a runner-up for an REU program and they said, sorry, we have used all our funding on other students, and you came back to them and said, I'll come for free and I'll pay my own salary, they might do that. They might not be allowed to. It all depends on who's administering the program. But that also works if you just want to go and make your own REU experience at another university. So let's say you're from Pittsburgh and you just happen to know someone at Carnegie Mellon who has a lab doing something interesting. You can get a position in that lab. The person says, I don't have any money to pay you. You say, I'll pay myself my Monroe salary. That's fine. We would love that. Because what that does is to create an opportunity for a student to do research that doesn't even cost one of our professors, the amount of time that it takes to supervise that. So it's wonderful. We're so happy. Now, there does have to be a William Mary professor who's connected, who at least has emailed that professor to vet the experience a little bit and to write a letter of support saying, I'm not going to be working with the student, but they're going to be working with the so-and-so, and I will vouch for that and make sure that they complete their project and that they come back here and present it on campus. So the answer is yes, but it was a long, complicated version of yes.
Perfect. And then we have a question. Is it common for undergraduates to work together on the same funded summer research project?
Yes and no. It's very common for students to be working on related projects under a professor. For example, students under me, they all work on something to do with birds, usually how birds are affected by pollution. So they're all related projects. But 2 of them wouldn't be working on the exact same project. They would have their own projects because I want them to learn how to ask questions and figure out how to answer them and become independent scholars. So they might look very closely related to, say, your parents or the student's parents, but they would actually be separate projects. They would have their separate Monroe money, but that's the yes part of the answer. The no part of the answer is can two students well, it's not really no. Can two students work on something so closely related that's the exact same project and both get Monroe funding for it? We would actually send that proposal back to you and we'd say, look, the two of you need to work out what one person is doing and what the other person is doing and submit them as separate but related projects. And then, yes, we would fund it.
Great. That's all the questions we have right now.
Okay.
For
Good.
those tuning in, drop your questions in the Q&A box.
So let me just give you a few examples of the kinds of research that students do here or have done here recently. I told you about my own students already, and so I won't talk about that anymore, but I want to give you an idea of the great diversity of undergraduate research that goes on here. And better than me talking to you about it is to go to that website, Google Charles Center Undergraduate Research Month, and make your way to that website, look at some of the projects, go down and look at some of the events that are happening this month. But what do students do here? Well, lots of students study birds because there's 3 of us professors who study birds, but they do it in very different ways. Okay, so there's a student who worked with, who was in my ornithology class, the study of birds, and was also a French major, and was also a Monroe Scholar, and is also an honors fellow. And this student really couldn't decide between if they're interested in birds and nature or if they're interested in France, in history of France. So they ended up doing their honors, their first research project on birds and why they hit radio towers and cell phone towers, and whether you can scare them from hitting those by beaming certain kinds of sounds up to wake them up before they hit the towers, because birds actually sleep while they're flying, so with just half their brain. And so that's the first just totally applied STEM research. But then the student thought, nah, actually I'm really more interested in the humanities. So they're looking at the role of birds, writing about birds, and the keeping of birds in French, in the 19th century French courts. So that's an example of what they're doing. That's what they're doing for their honors thesis. So that's the person who did one kind of project and then a very different kind of project. There was a thread there. They love birds, and that's how I happen to know about that student so well. They're graduating this year, and they've kind of moved over into the humanities, and that's the direction they want to go. But it's really very rewarding for professors to see that kind of development from a student who thinks that they want to be a scientist and then develops into something else. But you can see the thread there. You can see how it changed. So one of those was a Monroe project. One of them was their honors thesis. There's a student right now whose work I hope you'll find in Undergraduate Research Month, who has done is torn again, is an artist, is an art major, is also a scientist, and is a biology major. This student has decided to combine those things for their sort of final culmination of their research. Up until now, they've been studying art in classroom, and they've been studying marine biology through research, in the research lab, looking at the development of baby starfish and urchins and other sea creatures. What she has done now for Undergraduate Research Month is to put together a gallery, a virtual gallery that you can go visit, of collaborative projects where a student worked in the sciences and the arts, or a student from the sciences and a student from the arts got together and worked together on an art project. And so you can see 9 pieces. One of the pieces is a video of a guy playing a piece on the electric guitar that is through a device that he developed in physics. I actually don't really know what it's called, but it modifies the sound. Another is just some spectacular artwork on sea life. Another is a quilt showing mathematical patterns, that sort of thing. So each of these students did a piece of art and may or may not have been, really research worthy, but the research was putting together this virtual gallery and getting these teams together. And the amazing thing is that this student, in talking to me and other professors, this student so inspired one of the art professors that they created a class which 13 other students took, not the ones in this gallery. And that class curated a photography show in our art museum on campus, the Muscarelli Art Museum. And that show, by curating, it means they picked the artwork and they wrote the things that goes on the wall and they decided how the pieces are hung. And that show just opened this week as part of Undergraduate Research Month. That show, all those pieces they picked had to do with science. So it's art and science together. And that class and that show completely came from the student's idea of doing her own virtual gallery. So that's a long-winded way of saying that you never know where a Monroe project can go or what a Monroe student will do. The sky's the limit, and we aren't going to make you do your project at all, and you can do a smallish project if you want and then say research isn't for you, or you can just take it all the way and have professors be designing courses around your project. So that's another fun example, and you can see that if you look at the Sci Art Collaborative link at the bottom of the Undergraduate Research Month page. Okay, other projects. Here's a cool project. This is a collaborative one in the humanities. So this is an example of where students work on a professor's topic, but they also develop their own from that. So we have a professor in the history department, and he has students working with him, some Monroe Scholars, some not. And what his expertise is trying to explain the history of the development of both sides of the Atlantic, but in particular Central and South America, through looking at shipping. So when everything used to be moved around on boats before there were trains and planes, newspapers were full of announcements about when a ship left somewhere, who was on it, what it was carrying, and when a ship arrived somewhere, who was on it, what was carrying, and sadly, when the ship sank somewhere, who was on it and what it had been carrying. So these students work on reading newspapers in whatever language necessary and finding these announcements of ships making a journey. And from that, they build a database that this professor oversees and will make public. And scholars can use that database to try to understand the movement of enslaved people and goods and how the economies worked in the 18th century and before and since. So those students start out at a pretty basic level of just learning how to find these lists of these shipping records. And then as they become juniors and seniors, they can use that database that they have helped to build to ask their own questions about the history of the Atlantic trade. So that is a project where a Monroe Scholar could use their money to get involved in that project, or could get involved in that project during the school year and then use their money to do their independent research using that database that they had helped create. And they're the only people who have access to it in the whole world yet, because it's not public. That's an example of students working collaboratively, but again, independently. One might be looking at trade in goods, one might be looking at the trade in enslaved people, etc. One might be looking at one part of the world, one might be looking at another part of the world.
And it looks like we have another question coming.
Okay.
Would you say that research conducted by Monroe Scholars has looked very favorably to graduate programs like MD and PhDs?
Yes. The longer you do it, and the more you actually have results that you can talk about, the better. So if you do a 3-week Monroe project your first summer and don't get any conclusive results, and when you graduate can't quite remember what you did, that's not automatically impressive. But if you take that research as far as you can, it's extremely impressive. And the way that it turns up the most is that during interviews, no matter what you're interviewing for, whether it has anything to do with your research, I guarantee you the interview will ask you, if you've listed it, they'll ask you to tell you about your research. because they want to see whether it really was your research, whether you really can talk about it, whether you learned anything, whether you finished anything, and most importantly, can you get excited about something? And so having that and not just classes on your record is very important. And also, research is sometimes more impressive to talk about in an interview than a student organization that you were very involved in or a service organization that you were very involved in, because they might not relate too much to that. Okay, so let's say your organization was the ukulele club. You can show passion about that, but you may not have as good a conversation with your medical school admissions dean about the ukulele club as about the research that you did on the history of the Atlantic slave trade. So, yes is the answer, but I would say that it's not automatic. If you do a minimal job, it's not automatic. You have to actually do a good job, and you could continue that Monroe project for your whole time here at some level or other, and that would be amazing.
Wonderful. Looks like that was the last question we
Okay.
had, but feel free to
Well,
drop it.
I'll just make some final words, and then if there are any more questions, we still have some time. So my final words are: you have important decision to make. You can't go wrong. College is fantastic wherever you go, and you will get out of it exactly what you put into it. So this is not the biggest decision of your whole life, because I'm sure you've gotten into other schools that have a lot to offer. But I will say that if you want to get the most out of the outside of class parts of college, then coming here as a Monroe Scholar is a great way to do that, because you're guaranteed an entree into a professor's group because you have your own money, and that's not going to be stopping you if that's what you want. You also can do very independent research with just minimal input from a professor who agrees to supervise you. So many colleges that you may be looking at have honors colleges, and you may have got into that honors college, and you may be thinking, oh, I could be something special if because I got into the honors college at UNC or something like that. Well, all of William & Mary is an honors college. Okay, so we don't have an honors college because we don't need one. Everybody gets small classes as freshmen. Everybody gets close attention from professors. Everybody lives in dormitories with really smart students. As a Monroe Scholar, you can even go beyond that. You can live in a dormitory with the smartest of the incoming students. You are guaranteed a research project. You don't have to fight for one. And you're also guaranteed some opportunities every few weeks to meet with professors on a very casual basis in small groups to to sort of find out what they do. So on the one hand, not the biggest decision in the world that you're making right now. You can't go wrong. College is fantastic. It's so much better than high school. You're not going to believe it. Okay? But secondly, this is a great place to come to college. And being a Monroe Scholar puts you on fantastic footing for that. So we want you to come because we think we have a really great thing to offer you. And I personally think that undergraduate research, which is the basis of the Monroe Scholars program, is the most important reason to pick a college. It's just the biggest and best thing you can get out of college, with the broadest sort of appeal to there's so many different applications of that research, whether you become a researcher or whether you just use talking about your research as an interesting life experience in interviews or even at cocktail parties with your boss. It's still going to really put you in a good position. So I strongly urge you to consider coming here, working with me and all the wonderful faculty at William & Mary to do a Monroe project, be a Monroe Scholar, and see where you take it from there. Thank you very much
Absolutely.
for sitting through this long session, and I will be happy to answer other questions for a few minutes if there are any.
It looks like we have one final question. And the question is it common for the Monroe Project to lead to a doctoral thesis, or do these generally tend to be independent?
That's a hard one to answer because I don't really follow what people do when they go off to grad school and whether it's, but I would say indirectly, many of these do lead to graduate school because they lead first to a more engagement in a group of research, a research team here, and then that makes you very competitive for graduate school. So then you get into graduate school. Now, when you get to graduate school, you got a whole nother group of professors who are trying to get you to do other research. And so whether you get to do your main project or not, I would say it's indirect. I would say people aren't actually working on their very same projects. I would be lying if I thought that was, say that was the case. But I see a direct link to graduate school of many of these projects. And also, very importantly, people do these projects and they decide, you know what? I don't really like research. I'm not going to go to graduate school. And that's just as important. So we want you to find out who you are and what you want to do. And if that means not being a researcher, fantastic. At least you had a chance to find that out yourself. So
Perfect.
thank you again, and I hope to
Yeah.
see you all in the fall.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and feel free to tune into our other Monroe Scholar opportunities, such as the Scholar Showcase and the Speak with a Scholar as well. And thank you so much, Professor Cristol, for tuning in today and presenting about undergraduate research. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their afternoon. Bye.
Bye.